Hello and welcome to Molby On The Spot, your weekly chance. It's weekly again now. Thanks to Anfield Index to listen to the wit and wisdom of Jan Molby as he looks with me at the latest in Liverpool news. Good evening, Jan. How are you?
Yeah, good evening, Trevor. I'm very well indeed. Absolutely perfect.
Good to hear. Good to hear. We have a lot to talk about, man. And I think we'll start probably with a rare thing that we haven't been able to do much this year, if we're perfectly honest, which is reflect on a thumping good win. It was enjoyable on many, many levels. I'm sure, like myself, the first half hour didn't make you think anything like that would be possible in terms of a final result. We had what I would term sterile possession, if that makes sense. We were playing in front of them. It was all very tidy, ridiculous percentage of the ball, but no penetration. And the man who ended up doing quite a lot of damage for us in the end, Diogo Jota, looked like he was having an absolute mare. A lot of things, a lot of stories turned around for us towards the end of that first half and into that second half. And it's hard to feel that it wasn't a bit, Jesus, I hate saying it, but it felt like a little bit of a turning point for Diogo and for some of the others, and maybe for the run-in that we need.
I mean, again, and I have to be honest, Trevor, I'm maybe still a little bit reluctant to try and predict where we might be able to go with this. But there's no taking away from the second half against Leeds, where we looked every inch a really good team. The second half performance gave me a better feeling than the Manchester United performance or the Bournemouth one who ended 9-0 or whatever. This one gave me a better feeling. It did actually give me a feeling that we might just be able to use this, and that would be the first performance of the season we can actually use to go forward with. And it just gave me that feeling. Yes, I mean, you would argue that, once Leeds went 1-0 down, and Leeds play football in a way that they go 1-0 down and they try and get themselves back within 5 minutes, and then they just went chasing, and we just picked them off, isn't it? But I still think there was a lot of good things in that performance, and obviously shots at getting goals was important, but the impressive substitution when you look at who we were capable of bringing on, and then of course Trent. It was something that we spotted straight away that he had a slightly Pep Guardiola role in terms of his positioning in midfield, isn't it? Where Leeds gave him a lot of time and space, and don't do that to Trent. He'll kill you.
Yeah, he will kill you, and I'm glad you went there first, because that's the big takeaway from me as well. Yours is a far more intelligent and insightful mind when it comes to football than mine, and I wanted to ask you if you can genuinely say that you can follow what's happening here. You mentioned like the kind of a Guardiola role in terms of the way he might use a fullback, but it does require a particularly disciplined approach, because from what I can see, and again, please correct me if you think I've got this wrong. From what I can see, when we have the ball, Trent is pushing into that central area alongside Fab, getting on the ball as much as possible. I think he had something like 110 or 20 passes off our total, which is quite remarkable. And using it creatively like he did, for example, with the Darwin assist and several other occasions. But and when that is the case, then when we're in transition, it seems as if Ibu Konate has to funnel across slightly, and we're left with a more back three scenario with Robbo and Virgil and Ibu. Now, to me, that's a massive, complex change to make mid-season. I can see why they're doing it, because obviously it's a plan for next year, and hopefully it continues to work well. I did worry that if we had more sort of effective opponents in an attacking sense than Leeds, we might have suffered a little bit when we were defending. However, it did seem to work, and there were a few occasions where Ibu swept across beautifully, lovely sliding tackle, and he's off and running, and the whole thing seemed to work perfectly smoothly. And when you see Trent in that form going forward, you can understand why it's being done. Is there anything you can do to shed a little bit of light on anything I might be missing there? Or do you think I've got that generally right, that it's Trent in the midfield as part of almost like a pivot there with Fab when we have the ball, and then when we're defending, he reverts a little bit more to type unless we're in transition? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think it's a very difficult role. You know, City have obviously been using it. Arsenal do it to a certain extent when Zinchenko is fit and available. But certainly City, it's a little bit easier, I think, because of the way that City play. And City in a lot of games have 70-75% possession, isn't it? So you don't quite have that same fear when you're out in transition or when the opposition got the ball. So I totally agree in that this was a nice, easy game for Trent to play that role. So we play a 3-2-4-1 when he steps into midfield, and it works very well. It worked very well against Leeds. But I totally agree that there's other matches where, you know, you might almost be a little bit too scared to actually watch, isn't it? Because we could certainly get exposed, isn't it? So on the back of the Leeds performance, there's a lot of positives in terms of the way forward and how we might want to play in the future, isn't it? But I would still be a little bit skeptical and just think where they would, because we would also try. We're a tempo team, aren't we? You know, we like to move the ball from one end of the pitch to the other very, very quick. So we're a tempo team. City isn't necessarily a tempo team. They're more of a possession team, aren't they? So I don't know how well they would fit in with the way that we like the games to be played. You know, at basically 100 mile an hour, up and down, and you know whether you can actually. I mean, you watch John Stones when he goes into that midfield, but they have possession for 30, 60, 90 seconds, isn't it? We're not always like that. So we might have to change the way that we play a little bit. Which, if that's going to be the case, then we might have to rethink the midfield players that we think we might be able to get for next season. So I'm always reluctant, Trevor, because our manager is Jurgen Klopp. I'm always reluctant to think that we're going to be going down the Pep Guardiola Manchester City route. He is a 4-3-3 manager. That's his strength, isn't it? But I guess he just felt he had to do something.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think desperate times, desperate measures, and all that. And we both talked about when the game is in transition, and people have mentioned that this is a season of transition, which to me always seemed daft. But I do have a question about the concept of transition for you in relation to our man Trent. Because you'll hear and you'll have seen, if not ex-colleagues of yours per se, then certainly pros who have played the game at different times or perhaps against you, talking about how Trent should be a midfielder. And, you know, an awful lot of them wouldn't be particularly, I wouldn't have thought, renowned for their insight or wisdom, to be perfectly fair. But they're not on their own. A lot of people are talking about this concept and have been talking about this concept of, well, if Trent is going to get exposed, which I think too much has been made of. The kid's had not a great season, but he's been very good. They're solid defensively in others. But if he is going to be exposed and so on and so forth, which has a lot to do with the midfield in front of him, then we should possibly think about accommodating midfield. This is a long-winded way, Jan, of saying, do you think we might be seeing the beginning of an experiment whereby Trent might feature in midfield and therefore it will have an impact in our recruitment in terms of maybe looking for a more traditional centre-back? Or do you think this is the plan now going forward?
I generally don't know.
Yeah,
I would have to say that I still feel that when Trent is at his absolute peak, you could probably still get more from him as a right back. You know, I can listen. Trent can play in midfield. Robbo can play in midfield, yeah. But to what extent? You know, there's nobody. We can all have a go in midfield and go okay. And Monday night was all about possession and about having the ball, isn't it? But I just can't see Trent being a midfield player in any other way than being as a right back stepping into midfield. I just can't see us being able to make that big. And I don't think, and let's not forget, I mean, Trent at his best, and we remember how good he was, Trevor. I don't think he'd be able to replicate that in midfield. I still think to get the absolute best from Trent, is when he plays right back, and when the team is right again, when he's less exposed defending, isn't it? Because don't tell me that him playing this role or whatever, or even in midfield, is going to expose him less to the defensive side of the game, you know. So it's interesting. I think it's interesting. I like the idea. I like to see, you know, the way he strolls around the pitch and he sees things quicker than anyone else. He's got every club in his bag in terms of how he wants to play the pass, inside, outside. You know, always picks the right tools to play that pass, isn't he? You know, it's incredible. You know, because that's half the battle, Trevor, isn't it? You see a pass, and then the next thing you have to make a decision of how do I play the pass. You know, and that's where Trent is exceptional. You get a lot of really, really good passes, but they have one or two ways of passing that ball, don't they? You know, and most of good passes, it's a solid, isn't it? Inside, you know, instep or whatever. But his ability to pick the right way of playing the pass, I think, is as impressive as his ability to spot the space and the pass before anyone else, isn't it? I do think it's remarkable.
Yeah, and for that reason, I see no particular need to move him from where he was able to quarterback games when he was a much younger kid, from right back in a way that was kind of revolutionary, if we're being honest. There weren't many before him that could do that. So, look, it'll be interesting to see. You're dead right. We'll have to wait and see. It's the recruitment will probably tell a few tales there. Just on that, again, you know me, my head's always flitting around when I'm listening to you talking there. And I was listening to what you're saying about, you know, people hitting the pass with a certain part of their foot to make sure of it and whatever, and having that certainty. There's, in Thiago, a fella there who, what I've always loved about Thiago is he'll use whatever part of his leg, foot, right, left, chest, whatever is around or is the most opportune to make the ball go in a certain direction as quickly as possible. That's a rare thing, isn't it, Jan? Because I noticed him doing a few bits in training, and I was thinking, yeah, that kid's, it would be a shame if he doesn't win a major trophy with us, because he's such a special footballer.
Yeah, he is, and it's also this thing about the idea when you play a pass is to try and help the next guy, isn't it? You know, to try and give him as much time and as much space as possible. But also, so you see a pass and you want to play that pass, but you want to make sure that pass is to the advantage of your teammate, don't you? So you want to take as much work out of that pass as possible. You want to do the work for them with the passes. And yeah, Thiago and Trent, yeah, are exceptional on that. I like the fact that you mentioned Thiago, isn't it? Whether it's a back heel or he moves it on with his thigh, or, you know, a chest pass or whatever it is, but understands the importance of getting the ball to the next person as quick as you possibly can, isn't it? So yeah, Thiago, I guess Thiago's going to be hanging around for a little while, Trevor, isn't it? And we're keeping our fingers crossed that we're going to be bouncing back, isn't it? So yeah, let's hope there's a bit of silverware for him.
That's the thing, isn't it? We'll talk about that really, I suppose, in the next section of the show. We're going to look at what's possible or potential for the remainder of this campaign, and we'll segue into whether or not it's realistic for us to be challenging for big things next year. I suppose the answer will totally depend on recruitment, as ever, which will be another topic for later. But just to finish off with the match against Leeds, and we don't want to. It feels a bit daft to overdo the praise, like you, and I can sense you're wearing this as well. I don't want to overdo it. I was reluctant to talk about corners being turned as well, but it is nice to see certain things happening. And another really positive thing for me, that nobody seemed to pick up on, but I know you'll get it when I say it, is the way in which Mo Salah took his goals. They were some of the most deliberate strikes you're going to see. And this is a kid who's on a bad run. He's missing penalties. He's good, but he's not half the superstar that he has been for us. And that, if we're being honest, traces all the way back to halfway through last year. If we had the world-class version of Mo Salah all the way through to the end of the campaign, I think we have at least one of those two big trophies in the bag. That's my take. I've said it to you before. But there was something beautifully deliberate about both of those finishes that not many footballers can do. Like, it was the one where Diogo Jota slides him down on his left foot and he hammers it, but also that second finish was gorgeous. It was just so deliberate. Do you know what I'm saying about that, as it being a reflection of maybe confidence, perhaps?
Yeah, even the best players in the world need confidence, and I think it's best shown in his first goal when we make it 2-0, isn't it? Because it's a deliberate smash, isn't it? You know, it's a shot he's in control of, and I think that's probably been the biggest criticism of him this season, is how many shots he's had where he hasn't been in control. But that goal, like against Leeds, you know, a lot of people in that situation would just smash it and hit the target. He's also hit it hard, isn't it? But he's hit it where he wanted to hit it, isn't he? So it was with control, isn't it? But he looked razor sharp. He looked quick. He looked full of energy. He looked like he'd found that little bit of love for the game again, didn't he? You know, and the fact that he only scored 2 goals is bizarre, isn't it? Because I thought he really, really looked good.
3 men I want to speak about briefly to you, just to get a bit of feedback. First of all, your take on Cody Gakpo, on what he has become for us so far. I'm looking at this guy now, and I see a guy who seems to really have a certainty about what he's doing. I'm seeing technique and strength on the ball. He has great hold-up play, I think. Again, you don't hear enough about it. And I think that's massively important for us to have an out ball like that. But I'm loving his determined running, his direct running. I'm really, really happy with his finishing. Would you say he's been a success, Jan, compared to the price tag and expectation and all the rest of it?
No, possibly not at the moment, Trevor. But as with most foreign players, I think you need to give him time. What adds to his difficult start was the team wasn't playing well, and it became pretty evident early on that we were trying to convert him into a false 9. I believe he's a super kid. He's totally bought in to what Liverpool wants to do with him. I mean, it would have been easier for him to, you know, come into the team, do a bit of sulking, you know, and going, "You're not using me." I remember when we bought Stan Collymore, we didn't get the best from him when he came, and he said, "You're not using me right." Whether I was right or wrong, I don't know. And it would have been easy for Cody Gakpo to go, "You're not using me the way that I would have been used playing for the Netherlands or when I'm playing for PSV Eindhoven." But he's totally bought into what Liverpool wants to do with him. And that's obviously because they think he's got the tools in terms of awareness. Obviously, his strength is the link-up play. His strength is a bit like Bobby, dropping deep, isn't it? He still needs to work a little bit on that sort of number 9 role, you know, where you're not a false 9, you're dropping in, and where you need to be in with the centre halves. I think that's possibly where he needs a bit of work in it, but that will come. But I think he's done really well. He's done remarkably well. I'd never written him off, but I had written him off to a certain extent, thinking this kid's going to be for next season, because of the importance we always put on Liverpool's pre-seasons and the work that Klopp can do with the players. And I thought, well, you know, what's going to cure him is maybe 6 weeks with Klopp leading up to the season, but there's loads of hours you can work on it. But it looks like, and this is the feedback we're getting, he's a really intelligent kid. Penny's dropping really quick, isn't it? And it's shown in his play.
Yeah, for sure. And a guy who sort of made an instant hit when an awful lot of people didn't see it coming was Diogo Jota when he signed for the club. And he was one of those guys where, like his second goal, an awful lot of his finishes weren't always the cleanest, but they were always in the back of the net. A lot of you've seen people like that over the years, as I have, and it's not accidental. It's getting yourself into that spot. It's making contact and having intent and all the rest of it. But God Almighty, he was stinking the place out of it, and he had gone some 30-something small games a calendar year without scoring. Now, clearly there was injury and all the rest of it, but there was a lot of frustrating time on the pitch where he wasn't scoring. Again, as a man who's been around players in as a manager and as a player, can something as simple, I say simple, but can something as powerful as nabbing 2 goals in a match when you've been desperate for them, Can that be the kind of thing that can bounce you on? This is what people say. Is that real? Is that a real thing?
I think it's the only thing that cures it.
Right.
Because we've got evidence, and let's just stick with Jota. We've got evidence from him that we haven't been able to cure it elsewhere. We haven't been able to cure it at the training ground. We haven't been able to cure it with him sitting down and talking to people about it. We haven't been able to cure it with him saying, I'm going to give it everything I've got, which he always does. That hasn't cured it, has it? But I think these goals will. We know why Jurgen persists with him, because of how important he is in closing people down and the pressing that we do, isn't it? But now it looks like, and again, yeah, I would make a prediction in that he's turned the corner, and we will be seeing more what we normally expect from him, which to a certain extent is messy. He's a messy finisher, isn't he? You know what I mean? He's not a clean guy, is he? He's a bit of a messy finisher, isn't it? But he knows where the corners are. So I think we'll see Jota back to his best. Being very important in that pressing, getting his goals. Maybe sometimes getting his goals from where you go, wow, I didn't quite see that one coming. And maybe even have a performance where you go, there's no way he's the best player on the pitch. But he's just Jota, isn't he? That's just the way he is, isn't he? Sometimes he has really good games. Other times he doesn't play particularly well in it. But I think if we can creep back to him always having an impact, I think we're halfway there.
Yeah, with him, Thiago, Luis Diaz coming back, maybe there is something attainable. Again, we'll talk about that later. Last man I want to speak to you about is a guy who doesn't often get the plaudits, and a guy who seemed to be frozen out, to be fair, by Jurgen for a while. He was in a little club there with Ox and Naby, where even when fit, the manager wasn't really considering for selection. We've seen Fabio Carvalho has sort of fallen foul of that as well, and not in a bad way. I read some quotes from Jurgen during the week saying, he just doesn't fit what we want to do, and therefore blah blah blah. So they have set ideas, and it seemed for a while like Curtis Jones was very much on the outside with that little group. What was it you guys used to call them at Melwood? The lads who weren't playing, was it the Bitters or something? What was it?
Yeah, the Bitters was one of the names that they had. But yeah, the boys who weren't involved. Yeah. So you're obviously talking about. Have you mentioned the fact that you're talking about Curtis Jones?
I have.
Yeah. So Fabio Carvalho, I think Liverpool thought when he came in that they also had to convert him. And I think they thought they might be able to get a false nine out of Fabio. We're absolutely nowhere near that. So what future holds for him, I don't know. But I also believe that this was last chance saloon almost for Curtis. Where Klopp goes, go on then, you're going to get a run now. I'll give you a run of games. You know what you have to do. And again, the benefits were most definitely there. That pass for Jota's goal is, that's the type of pass that I love. It's in behind, it's along the ground. Jota doesn't have to do anything with that pass. All the work is in the pass, isn't it? I just don't think there is a more beautiful pass than that pass. In between these defenders who just can't get there. And I guess there was one or two when he played that pass and gone, where the fuck is that going? Knew exactly where it was going. So yeah, that's those passes, Trevor, along the ground. Same with Trent's cross for the goal as well, isn't it? I just love them where the work is in the pass, the cross, isn't it? And the guy just runs onto and finishes off, isn't it? Beautiful. I love those passes.
Yeah, well, I have seen you play many of them in your time, if we're being honest. And actually, the guy who before you used to do those passes, those sort of lovely curling forward passes into the run of someone, was the King. Kenny, I thought, was a master at those as well. How many times did he pick Rushy out around the back of a couple of defenders like that? And again, you very much continued that. I was watching some great clips. We must do a show, Jan. Actually, if it wouldn't embarrass you too much, we must do a show where I get a load of clips because I've been watching them regularly. I'll send them to you, and we can watch them at the same time, and you can talk us through some of the bits, because I think that could be a really interesting show. We'll need to get our video editors on it. But would you be up for that?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting bit, Trevor, is that most people see the runner. They see a guy who makes the run, and they want to get the ball to him, yeah.
Yeah, they want to.
So they go over the top, they go round and whatever, you know what I mean? They try all sorts. And then there's people who see the space,
yeah.
You know. And that's, you mentioned Kenny, isn't it? You know what I mean? Then there's people who see the space, isn't it? You know, and that's the difference, isn't it? And, you know, even at the level that we're talking about, not everybody has that ability to see the space. They see the runner, they see the man. And then they try and sort of force feed that man and go, I've got to get it into him, yeah. And how often have you seen that sort of pass uncomfortably on his thigh or hitting him half on his back and whatever it is, and you're thinking, keep it low in there, isn't it? But if you don't see it, Trevor, you can't play that pass.
You can't. I have hit the back of many lads' heads as they were running through on goal, trying my best to Molby it, but I didn't quite manage. Take it as a compliment. I was inspired. I want to look at the table with you briefly. I don't know if you had a squint at it recently. So it's starting to get annoyingly possible for us to achieve something small this year, Jan, which has been the case for every single season that Jurgen's been with us. There's been something achieved. Now, this would be by far the smallest goal that we've achieved. But considering how pathetic our form has been and how low we found ourselves and currently find ourselves in the table, I believe that getting Europa League would be a worthy achievement and something that we could possibly breathe a sigh of relief after getting. Now, it's quite the come down after years of Champions League and winning our second place and all that kind of stuff and the points totals. We know all that, but there has to be something to aim for. So actually, let's just get the elephant in the room out of the way before we even look at what's achievable and who we have to play and talk about points. Would you be in favour, because it's very much dividing fans, in favour of us getting the Europa League? Would you be happy if we got the Europa Conference League? Or would you, like a lot of intelligent people I've heard, have a very strong opinion that we'd be better off out of it altogether? What's your take on it?
I'm not 100% sure we were better without it. I think there is clubs who suffer because of European football. So take West Ham. You know, I think it's knocked their legs away from underneath them. I think Arsenal next year, Arsenal obviously going to be in the Champions League next year. I think it'd be a big problem for them. That, you know, I think it will keep them busy. I'm not sure. We're used to games, Trevor. Yeah. We're used to 55, 60 games. You know, and even with the change we're going to make in the summer, yeah, we need to be in Europe and we need to be in Europa League. If you win it, you can possibly squeeze 35, 40 million out of winning the competition. Worth taking. But also in terms of where do the players who games, isn't it? You know, so yeah, a month ago I'd have said, oh, let's just forget about it all and let's move on to next season, isn't it? But I think the more I look at it, we need to be in Europe.
There's something to be said, isn't there, for continuing the tempo, even if it is Thursday night instead of Wednesday night or whatever it happens to be, continuing the tempo of European football. But there's also something to be said for, and look, it's a long shot, but for winning the bloody thing, because say we do have the actual season of transition next year that people were trying to sell this one as, which was horse shit. But say we do have an actual season of transition where we do get a few new bodies in, we're trying to gel this new thing that we do, we might find ourselves dropping or struggling to get to the top four because there's going to be a lot of pressure on there. There's a lot of people with a lot of money and they're going to spend it. Chelsea will be a force next year with a proper manager. Newcastle, if they get Champions League, will spend heavily. Spurs, again, under different leadership, will be solid, as will United, as will City, as will Arsenal. It's going to be a real old struggle for, especially for a team who may have to introduce a lot of new faces. So I understand it's a big ask, but if you get into a trophy like that, it's the last one that Jurgen has to tick off his little box, and it does mean Champions League qualification. And in the light of what I was just saying, it might actually be the most realistic way for us to get it.
That's all. You've almost forgotten about that, Trevor. You know what the prize is. The prize. The only other thing is that from 2024, the Champions League format changes, so there's a chance that there might be 5 entries from the Premier League, regardless.
That's true.
So that in itself is interesting enough, isn't it? But you remember, was it 2016? We were in the Europa League final against Seville.
Yes. Heartbreaking.
Yeah, but leading up to sort of quarterfinals, yeah, okay, but you know what? Once that final was there, and we remember the Dortmund game, and we drew Manchester United as well, didn't we? And it was full on, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it was great.
Yeah, so I think once you're in it, Trevor, once you get over yourself, you know what I mean, and you get over yourself that we see ourselves as European royalty and we should be in the Champions League. Once you get over that and you go, well, this is actually where we are. Let's fucking deal with this then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it'll absolutely pass the test, and people will love it.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. And let's talk about how attainable it is. So if we just take the teams that we have to overhaul to get 5th, we'll just take 5th as the benchmark for it, because it has been the thing you need to get. Tottenham currently are in 5th place. They're the ones we need to overhaul on 53 points, and therefore 6 points ahead of us, but we have a game in hand over them. Newcastle are a further 3 points ahead in 4th currently, but they have the same amount of games played, so they're 6 points clear of us. So if we take those two as the realistic challengers, Villa, their defeat left them on 50 points, which is only 3 ahead of us with the same with a game extra played, so we can catch them very soon. Now, when the margins are only 3 and 6 points, and you have to play Aston Villa in this run-in, and you have to play Tottenham in this run-in, it's starting to look, I hate to say it, as if it's in our hands. That's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting, but it is a fact. And then you can also add the fact that Spurs have got to go to Newcastle, and Spurs play Manchester United, so they have their hands full. I think the difference between, and to be fair, Aston Villa, what a super job he's done. Unai Emery, he's done a really, really good job. So, credit to them. I'm not sure they're quite going to get enough points to finish ahead of us. But if you look at Spurs and Newcastle, I think it's two different. Newcastle are the really good team, and I think they'll probably get enough points to finish in the top 4. Spurs is not a good or a great team, but they have great players. And that's what kept their season alive, isn't it? The fact that they have some great players. So I don't think Spurs have done themselves any favours. Fair enough, sacking the manager, but not getting rid of the assistant and then allowing the assistant to be the manager with the same ideas and not refreshing that Preston. I think it's been a mistake, isn't it? So it wouldn't surprise me if Spurs finish 7th or 8th. So 2 weeks ago, I'd have said no chance because we've got to play away games. And that's been a big Achilles heel this year, isn't it? But all of a sudden I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, and it's a game at Anfield, I'm thinking our most difficult game between now and the end of the season is Aston Villa at Anfield. Beyond that, I think we'll be okay.
Yeah, it's funny you mention the form. It's so stunning and contrasting. Villa have 5 wins on the bounce, and Liverpool have 2 losses, 2 draws, and that recent win. I mean, it's stunning really to think how much we've left behind us on the table this season. It really is remarkable. So many points abandoned. But if we look at what's left to play, it's 8 games, unless I'm mistaken. I think it's 8 games, Jan, that we have left. And so that's 24 points. And that means we can get to 67, we can get to 71 points, which you would imagine in previous seasons, that's Champions League form. It won't be this year. Unless something remarkable happens, Newcastle really fall away, which they've got 4 wins and then a defeat. So people have put a lot on that and starting to think, oh, maybe they'll have a wobble. Yeah, I don't know. The Champions League thing, psychologically I'm ruling it out until it becomes something that we can actually genuinely talk about. But this Europa League place seems to be very much on the table for us. But we can talk all we want about the amount of points that are available. Let's go through the fixtures that are left and see if we can do a little running total here and see where we realistically might finish. Now, this is a bit unusual because you normally get the predictions at the end, but we've got this home game against Forest. Do we put that down as 3 points, Jan, just for the sake of this?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I actually think that Leeds are as good as Forest, but right. Forest don't play as naive as Leeds. So I think it'll be one of those sort of frustrating afternoons at Anfield. But once we break through, I think we'll beat them quite comfortably.
And when we look at our next couple of fixtures, West Ham, who, as you said, have been battered by the tolls of European football, they've gone from looking like such a solid unit under David Moyes, and he was getting a lot of praise, and I think the squad is just stretched. So we're away at West Ham, and then we're at home to Spurs. How many points out of 6 do you see there?
6.
Wow.
I think West Ham is a difficult game because the potential is there, but they've been massively underachieving all season. I don't think that's about to change. I've got a feeling they're going to get themselves through in the Europa Conference League. That will probably take their focus. They should be okay in terms of staying in the Premier League. So I think we'll just do that one. And Spurs at Anfield, I just think it's almost like one of them where you turn up and you go, okay, this is now like a straight shootout for a place in the Europa League, isn't it? And it's a bit like we go, let's deal with that. That's what we've got.
Yeah.
And I think we'll do that.
Yeah, as you say, each of these things, like for teams that are used to winning knockout games, our team, maybe that muscle memory will kick in. So that's 9 points totally so far in terms of potential predictions here. We've got 2 home games in the bounce then against Fulham and Brentford, both of whom we owe 1 out of 6 points there.
Yeah, I think so. I like Fulham. I think they've had a super season. They've fallen away a little bit of late. They're going to be without Mitrovic, which is a big loss in them. But still like them. I think they've done really, really well. But coming to our place will be okay. And Brentford, I think they've run their course. I think yet again they've had a super season. You talk about that second season in the Premier League. Are they going to fall away? Christian Eriksen no longer there, but he hasn't been a problem for them. They would talk about European football. They wouldn't be able to cope. I think they've run away a little bit. They basically play Brentford without the ball. They defend deep, try and cause you an awful lot of problems from set pieces, which we saw down there. It was a horrible game when we played down there. But I think at Anfield will be okay. So there's another 6 points, Trevor.
Wow. So that's a full complement so far. So we're up to 15 with 3 games left. Now, those 3 games do feature 2 away games, 1 at Leicester, 1 at Southampton, and at home to Villa. So first of all, the Leicester away match, things not going great for them. I suppose that could be a source of some confidence for us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and they've been dreadful at home, the second worst home team in the Premier League. Again, I'm not convinced that they've done themselves any favours. Is Dean Smith really a better manager than Brendan Rodgers? But obviously they felt the need for a change. But no. Leicester is one of those teams that can't play relegation football.
Yeah.
They can't set themselves up and play like Everton can. So I think it'll be a relatively open game against Leicester and we'll be all right.
That just leaves the 2. Now, you mentioned earlier on the likelihood of Villa being a real ding-dong battle, and it could have a lot. Mind you, I think if we've got that amount of wins so far under our belt, we might be very, very close to 5th, regardless of what happens against Villa. But if Villa stay on the run they're on, we will have to worry about it, and it might well be the decider for that place. So talk to me about your feeling about what we'll get out of Villa at home and then away at Southampton on the last day.
So I had a look at this yesterday, Trevor, and I felt, and I know it's been optimistic in it, but I felt that we would win 7 and draw 1 of the last 8 games. And I mentioned before that the one I'd looked at was the Aston Villa game. I think they've done a really good job. The way that they defend, they play very direct. There's a lot of energy in the team, isn't it? So I can see possibly drawing with Aston Villa at Anfield. And then, of course, we've got this scenario where people are already telling me that we'll get beat at Southampton if that means that Everton will go. You know, so if that will send Everton down, you know what I mean? But,
yeah.
And I can't promise you, Trevor, that Everton won't still be somewhere near the bottom 3 from the last day of the season. But I've got a feeling that Southampton might just be down before we go there, isn't it? So I think we'll win at Southampton as well.
Well, that would do it, to say the least. That would do it. And you're right. It's we're both being remarkably optimistic, but you know what else is there available to us in the season that's been pretty hellish? So I look forward to all of those calls being correct. I hope that's the case. Something strikes me as we move to the next little sequence here, which is, you know, the common denominator between two teams who have really, really underwhelmed spectacularly is one Frank Lampard. And I saw a lot of people. I wondered, again, as an ex-pro footballer who made the step to management, I wonder if you have a take, if you feel a certain empathy for Lampard, because there were people, maybe not the most insightful types. I saw one Richard Keys, for example, wondering what does Julian Nagelsmann have that Frank Lampard, who's a club legend, doesn't. And that was a sort of a sentiment that was being floated about. I would have thought what happened to him in his last couple of jobs really did leave it with little doubt that he might not be really management material. It looks really bad what's happening at the moment for him at Chelsea, but you know they are a club in disarray with the owner going in and talking to lads in the changing room and all sorts of mad stuff going on. Do you have any sympathy for Lampard? It crossed my mind during the week. I must ask Jan about this. You know, as a guy who's just trying to make the step up, or do you think that people should know what they're capable of and not capable of?
I like Frank. I don't know him particularly well, but I come across, he's always polite, chat about football. I thought he was a really good player, really effective footballer, you know what I mean?
Tremendous footballer.
Yeah, tremendous footballer. He just did what he did, didn't he, Trevor? And he did that for many years. So he's basically had 4 jobs: Derby, Chelsea, Everton, and back at Chelsea. Take the Derby job out of the equation. I think he's made some very brave choices. Mm-hmm. You know, he made a choice to become the manager at Chelsea in a period where there was a transfer embargo, so he couldn't buy any players, and it was a relatively young squad. That worked, but then once he got the money, it didn't work. Then to go to Everton, I think that's really, really brave with everything that's going on at Everton, knowing that, you know, there's every chance they're going to be involved near the bottom. And then, of course, to take this opportunity, because this opportunity is probably the one that might be able to, or might do some damage to his legendary status at Stamford Bridge, isn't it? You know, he's come in now, he's lost the first 4 games. Has Frank ever took time out to think what it might require to be a manager? Possibly not. You know this thing where you go, I've done it all, I know it all, this is my world, you know.
Yeah.
But it's not. You're in a different world. You know, yes, you're in football, but you're not in the dressing room. You're doing something totally different in it. So just to go back to the game, when did they play? Tuesday, and again beat 2-0 by Real Madrid. He picks a team with 3 centre halves, 2 wing backs, 3 defensive midfield players in a game where he's getting beat 2-0. He picked a team as if he was winning 2-0. You know, and he had 6 attackers on the bench. 17 goals the players who started the game have scored this season. So it's, yeah. I think if you wanted to keep the fans on side, you'd have played 5 attackers and gone down trying to put it right, wouldn't you have? You know, instead of this sort of timid approach to the game, isn't it? So there's still people within the game, Trevor, who thinks he's had a rough deal at all the clubs he's been at, and he'll reinvent himself and turn out to be a top manager. I'm not one of them.
You're not.
No, I'm not. No, I would love it to happen. You know, and also because of him and because of the brave decisions he's made, isn't it? But I'm more and more looking and thinking, what can you bring apart from you bring Frank Lampard? You know, and that's why he got the job the second time around at Chelsea, isn't it? I didn't think it was a particularly good idea. I didn't think it was a particularly bad idea. You know, I thought, well, okay, I can see what they can use Frank for. You know, he can unite the club, and he can get a bit of atmosphere back in the stands, and he can get less anger towards the owners because now Big Frank is back, isn't it? But he hasn't been able to do any of that. Yeah, I feel sorry for him, but it kind of is. It is what it is, Trevor, isn't it? You know what I mean? You have to be a big boy in that world, isn't it? And you just have to be prepared for the challenges. And I'd almost go as far to say that he's been ill prepared.
Yeah, I guess that could be just a factor, like you say, of maybe a certain assumption of ability and level based on the fact that you've been this high performer all your life. And like you say, it doesn't necessarily work out that way. Maybe he will disappear off somewhere and reinvent himself, who knows. We'll watch it carefully. I wanted to talk to you about at least 2 more subjects before we finish. So I think what we'll do is we put the potential player thing on the back burner, because honestly, it's all speculation. It's a bit wild, and we had a look at a few midfielders last week anyway. So I think since we were speaking, the whole Jude Bellingham thing has fallen apart a bit. I don't think that had happened before we were talking last. Well, whether it had or not, it's been the line's been drawn under it since anyway. I think it was the weekend. There was some stuff coming out. It looks as if we will have a limited war chest in the summer, so it's going to be interesting to see what we do with that. All sorts of names being linked. We'll keep an eye on them as they become a little bit more concrete. But a name that I wanted to run past you that we have been linked with in a role that a lot of people have said might well be necessary for us at the moment is a 43-year-old German called Tim Steiten, who is apparently being lined up as sporting director of football, whatever the term is going to be. He has a background with Werder Bremen as a youth scout, head of youth scout, house scouting, became sporting director there and then director of football before moving on to Leverkusen, where he was head of scouting and then sports coordinator, which I presume is again a kind of a sporting director type role. Looks like a guy who's very capable. I was having a look at some of the players that he's recruited, and he does look to have an eye in that regard. Apparently his brother is also a scout and pretty handy at it, so maybe that they might come as a package, who knows. You've heard this rumour, I assume, Jan. What do you make of this? And do you think it's something that we need at the club in terms of maybe a filter above Jurgen?
Yeah, I do, yeah. I mean, it's worked very well for us in the past. You have a guy who works closely with the owners, who's also in charge of bringing in the players, obviously in close working relationship with the managers. And don't be fooled just because he's a German and people now think here's one of Jurgen's old mates. You know what I mean? Because that's not how we do things. You know, it's not how we do things at Anfield. Is, you know, we really go through it when we find these people best suited for the jobs. And I'm glad you mentioned the fact that some of the players he's picked out over the years, because that tells me and gives me an idea of he's got an eye. He's got an eye for players who make a difference. So should it happen, I think we're in good hands here. Absolutely. I like the idea.
I like the idea myself, I have to say. And obviously it'll come too late, probably, you imagine, for the decisions being made about summer recruitment. I think there's a lot of talk about how that committee is already in situ with Jurgen and a few of the other big boys making a few calls. So let's see how that works. Can we finish by having a quick look at Forest, who are our next opponents in the league? And it's interesting to note that I think it's a good old Saturday 3 o'clock kickoff that we've got for a change next. So that'll be a bit of fun. But last time out, they played United at home. They got a 2-0 beating. They got the same scoreline of a beating away at Villa previous to that. Another 2 goals conceded where they scored 1 against Leeds at Leeds before that. Their previous result was a 1-1 draw with Wolves at their place at Nottingham Forest. And they had a 2-1 reversal at their place before that against Newcastle. Looking at that league table that we spoke about before, you'd said earlier on you thought Leeds were a better side, and Forest's last 5 results, 4 losses and a draw, even more unimpressive than ours. It's hard to see too much by way of scary opposition here. However, let's just do what we always do, and I'm going to throw a few names at you, and then you can respond to the whole thing for me. I was really, we know that they went absolutely bananas in the transfer market, and it was always going to be a gamble because the amount of bodies they took in was 20 something odd, wasn't it, I think, in the summer. Their last lineup where they went against United and got beat 2-0, they had Navas, who I thought was a great get in goal, Felipe McKenna and Niakate across the back in a 3, Williams, who were low, and Lodi, Danilo and Fryer in the middle, Gibbs White sort of behind Johnson, and Awani. Again, some familiar names there to Liverpool folks. On their bench that night, they had Jesse Lingard, who people will know. Sam Sturridge came on. Mangala came on as well. They had John Joe Shelby on there, which some people mightn't even know. Wayne Hennessy was on the bench as well as Andre Ayew and a couple of others. So there are some names there, but they seem to be struggling to do the wins that will keep them in the division. So let's talk about what you make of them, what you think the challenge they'll present will be, if any, and then you might finish off by saying whether or not you think they're going to stay in this league of ours.
So we spoke about Frank Lampard before and whether we think he's a good manager or not a good manager. I think Forest has got a good manager. I think Steve Cooper is an excellent manager. I think he's got a real eye for what it takes, but he's been dealt a lousy hand. I think every manager who takes a team into the Premier League and you're then being told that you're going to get 20-odd players, you might think, wow, they're going to do everything they can to possibly help me, but they haven't helped him. Because I believe that of the players they brought in, you could have put a line through 75% of them and gone, not good enough, or some of them gone, used to be good enough, but no longer good enough. So I think he's been dealt. Yeah, I think he's been dealt a really lousy. And you mentioned some of the names there, whether it's Lingard or whoever. John Joe Shelby taking him from Newcastle and expecting him to lift things, isn't it? It was never going to happen. Nico Williams was a gamble. He hasn't come off. So they've had a real problem. In my opinion, they've got 3 players. The goalkeeper, tried and trusted, Keylor Navas. He's been everywhere. He's a good goalkeeper. Without him, they got beat 5 or 6 last week against Manchester United. And then they got the 2 young ones. Gibbs White, I thought they paid a lot of money when they took him from Wolves, and Johnson. And that's basically what they've got in terms of Premier League quality. And to be fair, Gibbs White and Brennan Johnson has kept it going for them for a long time, because they're the ones who create the chances. They're the ones who look like they're going to be scoring the goals. But it's just nowhere near enough. They'll come to Anfield, they'll try and be well organised, but due to individual or lack of individual class, as I said before, eventually will come through them. I can't see them carrying much of a threat. It wouldn't surprise me if it's one of those 3-0 wins without really getting out of second gear. And in terms of will they stay up? No. I think they've threatened twice in the season where there have been a little bit of runs and you think, here we go, get himself out of what looks trouble. But they're back in it now. And I can't see what they've got. What we got for the last throw of the dice, what we got, and you go, nah, that's not enough. We've seen what you've got, and what you've got is probably not enough. So, yeah, I think it's a shame, because you look at some of the other clubs without mentioning names, and Forest belongs, don't they? Forest is a big old football club, isn't it? You know what I mean? But if you can't get it right with the owner, and his son was involved in the recruitment, whatever it is, and they go bang, bang, bang and buy everybody, isn't it? They made a mess of it. Steve Cooper came in last year in the Championship, cleaned up their mess, took them into the Premier League. Okay, with a lot of loan players. They have an awful lot of loan players or whatever, and then they wanted to make permanent signings, and it's just backfired on them.
Just before we go, I can't remember if I brought this up with you or not last week, but I had been watching in the lead up to our show just a few old clips, just sort of nostalgia stuff really for myself. And someone was talking about, was it Tom Finney who was in the stand when Liverpool, your team, beat Forest 5-0 in one of the most celebrated wins in the history of the league, of the top division. You were on the pitch that night in the second half. Did it feel special to you in terms of dominance?
Yeah, it did. I think even as players, and it isn't always reflected in the scoreline. There can be goals where you go, wow, we played well there today, and you might only have won 2-1 or 2-0 or whatever, isn't it? And obviously the reason that, and people go, well, what's a big gig beating the Forest 5-0? Well, Forest at that time, did they finish second or third in the league that year? There are some really good players. This was in the days where there was, Stuart Pearce and Des Walker and Nigel Clough, and Neil Webb was probably still there.
He was.
So they had a lot of good players, but irresistible. I mean, they came to play, and that was probably a mistake, isn't it? Steve McMahon was on fire, John Barnes, Peter Beardsley. It was one of them, and I can understand where Tom Finney would have come from, having seen that and gone, wow, that takes some beating. You know what I mean? And that was his best performance.
Yeah, I remember when I heard it at the time, well, that's quite the compliment from quite the footballer. So yeah, it always stuck in my head. We should wrap it up at there. It's just a minute to the hour, and we like to get you off on time for another fantastic show, Jan. As ever, thanks very much.
No problem, Trevor. I guess there's a chance we might beat them 5-0 again. I don't know, but I do think we'll win.
I will take that, my friend, and we all will. And we will be back, Jan and I, with you next week to talk about whatever happens, 5-0, 4-0, 3-0, or whatever, and hopefully be a little bit further on the road to that Europa League we've decided we really want to win. Okay, take care. We'll talk to you soon.